How you going, people? Well, I don't listen to a whole bunch of people because I'm just too busy doing videos and watching and trying to keep up with my emails and comments and YouTube harassment, canceling copyright on everything I say, whatever. So I don't sit down and watch a whole bunch of guys, but I usually listen to Peter Schiff when I'm doing my walk because I just can turn it on, stick my phone in my pocket, and listen to him. And I usually listen to him at 1.5 or 1 3/4. What do I have him playing back? I have him at 175. So you're going to see that he's talking really fast here. So, but this guy, Peter Schiff, a lot of people hate him. A lot of people don't like him, whatever. I think his dad went to jail for not paying income tax or fighting the government or something. I can't remember. I know his dad went to jail for something against the government. So he is, well, I say anti-government. Some people think that's not true. I want limited government. I want way limited government. I want government out of my life. And Peter talks like a very anti-government guy also. He's not promoting anarchy or violence, and I'm not sure I don't know if he's a big gun guy, but he kind of turned me off a little bit because he was always cracking on Trump. And I was like, dude, why are you beating up Trump? He's freaking so much better than the left. How can you crack on him? Well, the more you listen to him, he actually says in this 4-hour video that he did during the election that he voted for Trump the first time and he'd vote for him again because he thinks everything's going to get worse under Biden because the liberals love to spend, print money, etc. And governments, they're always in your business more. So he is anti-government. But he cracks on Trump on things that I kind of agree with, that Trump isn't cutting as much as he said, and he's not draining the swamp as much as he said. Now, I think part of that, I don't think it's because Trump's being lazy and he just said it and he's not trying. I think he had no idea of the pushback and the media and the investigations and the liberal left blocking him and the Rhino Republicans backstabbing him. He had no idea. And I think that's why I give Trump more credit that he wasn't able to do what he said he was going to do as much as he said he was going to do it because of all the pushback. So, you know, and people will think I'm a Trump tard or Trump lover or whatever. Look, man, I like the guy. I think he's an alpha male and he's my type of guy. He's no bullshit. Calls it like he sees it, and he don't care if he pisses people off. So I like people like that. I hate mealy-mouthed liars that want to get along with everybody and reach across the aisle and be friends and let everybody walk all over you and work with the left even though they're an enemy and they're trying to destroy everything. I don't like those type of guys. So, Peter, if you want to listen to him, I think you'll get some good he explains, he is a master at explaining the free market and cryptocurrencies. And now a lot of people who are in a Bitchute hate him because he's not a big Bitchute guy. He's a big gold and silver guy, but he doesn't push gold and silver like you should sell everything and buy only gold. He looks at it as a saving of your future. It's an insurance policy to the cash because he knows, just like I know and anybody with any sense knows, our dollar days are numbered. And you're gonna lose all your value. All you people who think you've been saving your whole life and you've got all this money in the bank, all that shit's going in half, if not 1/4, when our dollar fails. And it's gonna fail because you cannot have government printing money like we print it and calling it QE and calling it helping and calling it the government rescuing. You just can't do that. And other countries will be like, hey, we ain't getting rescued. You guys are printing money for your freaking country. You guys are doing good. We're using your freaking dollar that ain't worth shit. We're going to stop using it. When that happens, there's going to be a lot of pissed off people. There are going to be a lot of Democrats out there crying, I can't believe this happened. They'll be trying to blame Trump and all the Republicans. But I'm telling you, our dollar's going down. And he has been predicting this for a while. And again, he owns some gold companies. So you got to take that. Obviously, you know, somebody loses credibility when they're selling something that they're saying is so great. But the way he sells it, he makes a logical argument and he explains it. So I had this playing in the background on one and 7.5 speed, and it's a 4-hour video. But there was quite a few little places to where he said some pretty things that I thought was freaking just a nice, elegant way to shed some light on sometimes a little bit of a confusing subject. So I'm going to do some clips of the things. I'm going to go back through this video, 4 hours. and I'm going to do some clips to some of the areas that I think he did a really good job. And he'll be talking fast.
This evening, rather, maybe an hour or so ago, the stock market was up, foreign currency.
So he talks pretty slow to me. So like I said, I play him on 175. Normally his podcasts are about an hour. So if I put him on 1.5 speed, I can walk for 30 minutes on my driveway and listen to his whole hour podcast. So that's why I listen to him when he puts out a video. It's something in the background, and I get, like I said, he says a lot of things in a good way to explain how the left. One of the best things he said, I don't think he said it in here, is as how the that one payer system, the way the government is trying to take over the healthcare system, and we got that one payer, and insurance companies are mandated by government to take pre-existing conditions. Now, I know there's somebody out there with pre-existing, or they got an uncle, friend, cousin, sister, mother, brother who has a pre-existing. It's not fair that she can't get insurance. Well, you know what? Tough shit. Life isn't fair. The problem with that, and the way he explains it is freaking perfect, is if you allow people only to get insurance when they need it, then nobody's going to pay into the pot to make sure insurance companies can pay for those that do need it. And we have a group pot that everybody pays in. Therefore, the insurance company can pay out and take care of you when you need it. Because if you have 100 people paying in and only one guy gets sick, then the insurance company, those other people can pay. And then if you get sick, the other 100 people can pay. And that's the way insurance is supposed to work. Well, with the one payer, to where now the government says you have to take pre-existing conditions, the way Peter explains it is, if you didn't make people have car insurance, and you were only allowed, or insurance companies had to give you insurance, how many people would not get insurance till they had a wreck? I would wait till I had a wreck and go, shit, now I need insurance. Okay, hey, insurance company, yeah, I need you to pay $5,000 to fix my car, and now I want insurance. Oh yeah, I'll pay you now. I'll pay you for a couple months. You'll pay my claim. Guess what? I cancel my insurance, and then I wait for the next accident. That's why this forcing private companies to take people who are already sick, and you wonder why our healthcare system is failing, because when government gets involved to fix something, they always screw it up and make it 10 times worse. And then what do they do when they make it worse? They claim it's someone else's fault, and they need more money and more government to fix it. I mean, look, more government is never better. Me and him agree on that 100%. And I'm going to go through some little blurbs on some different things, and I'll just play them in this video. All right, here we go.
What is going to cause the Fed's engine to rev highest? And I think the markets are convinced that a Biden presidency with a Democratic Senate and a Democratic House, otherwise known as the clean sweep, the blue wave, is what everybody is going to surf into big gains, big profits in the stock market. I think the worst outcome for the stimulus junkies is a Biden win with the Republicans maintaining control of the Senate. I think that is the only dynamic that will slow down the stimulus juggernaut. I mean, it's not going to derail it, but it may slow it down, because the only chance that Senate Republicans are going to find religion on the debt is if there's a Democratic president. Is the more stimulus sedative to the real economy. And it's a self-perpetuating spiral, because the more stimulus we get, the weaker the economy gets. But the prescription for a weak economy is more stimulus. So as the economy gets weaker, we get more stimulus. The stimulus weakens the economy, which means now we get more of it. And it just continues. But the only thing that really benefits from a stimulus is the stock market, because the stock market gets pushed up by all the cheap money. But eventually, the bottom is going to drop out of the dollar, and then the stimulus isn't going to matter. And this economy has never been weaker. I mean, we have record trade deficits and record budget deficits. That is not a sign of economic health. If we had a healthy, vibrant economy, our trade deficits would be smaller. Our budget deficits would be smaller. We are on massive artificial life support. That is what is keeping the economy alive. If either of the candidates, had I been able to vote, I would have voted for Trump again. I would not have voted for Biden, but I didn't have that choice. So I didn't have to choose the lesser of the two evils. I just voted in the local elections for governor, other mayor, and vote on that question. But I didn't get to vote for president. But I wish I could have been more enthusiastic about Trump, and I'm not. I mean, there are things that I like about Trump. So I mean, I'm not like one of these guys that just hates Trump. There are things that I legitimately like about Donald Trump, but there are a lot of things I dislike about Trump. The problem is there's nothing I like about Biden. I mean, I dislike everything about Joe Biden. Trump is not my ideal president, but Biden is much further away from my ideal president than is Donald Trump. They don't have that from Trump. At least they can pretend that they're getting it from Trump. But so I'd like to see more Americans not taken in by the false promise of socialism. It would be interesting to see what type of support Trump could get if he actually was a champion of individual liberty and freedom and limited government, if he actually tried to cut government spending and unleash free market capitalism, and if he really campaigned on individuals and the rugged individual and what made America great, what made America unique, and what made American citizens unique among the people of the world, the degree of freedom that we have. And freedom is freedom from government. That's what freedom is all about. It's about the government leaving you alone so you can do what you want to do. You can pursue your happiness in the way that you see fit without the government trying to micromanage your life and telling you what you can do and what you can't do. That's what made America great. It was the absence of government. Right? All the things that Biden wants to do are the reasons that other countries weren't great. It's because we weren't doing those things. We had a lot of freedom, and Biden wants to take away that freedom and replace it with government. And people think that's good because they're confusing free stuff with freedom. I don't want anything for free. I don't want any free stuff. I want to earn whatever I have. And everybody else should want the same thing. And to the extent that people are unable to do that for themselves, for whatever reason, then their fellow Americans should be free to give them a hand, to help them out, which is what Americans do, which is what Americans have always done, is help out people who are less fortunate. The problem is when you assign that function to government, then it doesn't get done. And instead of helping people out of poverty, government traps people in poverty. But I don't want to, digress to that. I want to just, stay on the topic here. Strategy, regardless of the outcome of this election. I mean, I think we're on the Titanic, and we've already hit the iceberg. I mean, it doesn't matter how we rearrange these deck chairs. I think the Titanic will sink quicker under Biden and with a blue wave and Democratic clean sweep. So I think that the results will be more apparent quicker under that situation. So I think the dollar will fall faster. I think gold will rise sooner and more if the Democrats have a clean sweep. But I think the dollar's going down regardless. I mean, the dollar's fate has been sealed. Gold's going up. The U.S. stock market, I mean, look, the real value of U.S. stocks are going down. No question about it. The market is extremely buy it. That would include stocks. But don't allow inflation to fool you into thinking you're richer than you really are. Inflation makes you think you're rich as you're getting poor because you look at these numbers. Oh, I got all this money, but then try to spend it and see how much everything costs. And at some point, the government is going to blame that inflation on all sorts of boogeymen. But the only culprit is the Fed and the government that is, creating all these deficits that the Fed is monetizing. But can both gold and Bitcoin benefit together from MMT? Look, gold will definitely benefit from modern monetary theory, right? And if you don't know what modern monetary theory is, MMT, it's just money printing. Modern monetary theory is what they did in Zimbabwe. It's what they've done in Argentina. It's what they did in the Weimar Republic. So there's nothing modern about it. I mean, we've had hyperinflations for a long time. It's not even a theory, because at least if you have a theory, then maybe it can work. If you know for a fact that it doesn't work, then it's not theoretical, right? So the whole name is a misnomer. It's just monetizing debt. It's the idea that we can have whatever we want if we print the money to pay for it. It's sheer asinine. But of course, that's exactly what politicians want to pretend is true, because that's how they play Santa Claus, right? They get to give you all this government and pretend it doesn't cost you anything. But will it be good for gold? Absolutely. It will be good for gold. It can be good for Bitcoin to the extent that people are dumb enough to buy Bitcoin instead of gold. And so people could react to more inflation.
Here's where he pisses off the Bitcoin people, because people who are like, you got to buy Bitcoin, it's the greatest, it's wonderful. Look, to me, Bitcoin isn't like a limited resource like gold. Gold, there's only so much. There's only so much we can mine. There's only so much here. It's being used. Actually, they say gold doesn't get used. It can be reused. You don't consume it. It's always there. But still, there's only a limited amount. And gold is just, through the ages of time, has always been worth something. So, again, full disclosure, he owns a gold company. He sells and buy gold. You can get company. You can buy stuff from him. Set up account and everything. If you want to watch this complete thing without me interrupting and fast, it was election night coverage. But I'm just I want to show the highlights on the things that I agree with what he's saying.
In the U.S. And it's not just people in the oil industry. It frustrates me when I hear the people who are criticizing Biden, where he wants to declare war on the U.S. oil industry, about how this is bad for the people who work in that industry. It is. But you don't want to just focus on how it's bad for people who work in oil, because that's only a certain percentage of the voters. But all the voters buy oil. Everybody uses oil. And so anything that reduces the production of oil increases the cost. So everybody is going to suffer. People in states that don't produce any oil will suffer from the Biden proposals to drive up the cost of energy in this country. And not just the energy you use directly, but the energy you use indirectly, because so many products that you buy require energy, both to produce them and to transport them. So the entire economy ends up being weaker because of these anti-energy policies. So don't just say, oh, it's bad for the people who lose their jobs. It's bad for everybody. And a lot more people will end up losing their jobs because the U.S. economy is less productive and less competitive as a result of these added regulations that lead to less production and higher oil prices for everybody in America, including American companies that have to compete globally on price. And their prices are going to go up because their energy costs are going to go up. I'm going to clean up again. And I think I'm going to make even more money in this decade than I made in the first decade of the century. So I think I'm perfectly positioned to clean up. And I'm perfectly positioned myself living in Puerto Rico, so I don't have to give half or more of my gains to the U.S. government, because they're not going to be able to tax me. And the taxes are going way up. I do expect capital gains rates, if Biden wins, to be well in excess of 50%. And that's a big number. And who knows? It could be 60, 70%, whatever, if you add the state taxes. And I wouldn't be surprised if they pass some kind of windfall profit. I mean, I expect the profits to be so big in certain sectors. Who the hell knows? They might have some kind of 90% windfall profit tax. All I know is they can't hit Puerto Rico with those taxes. So that's why I voted against statehood. And I hope more people in here are smart enough to realize that statehood is a bill of goods. But the best thing Puerto Rico has going for it is the fact that it's not a state. He's from Europe somewhere. Peter, how do you respond to those that argue that QE, in fact, pulls liquidity from the market and that the money is never printed? Of course, look, QE, the Fed creates the money. That's what it does. The Fed prints money and buys bonds. That's what it's doing. But yes, a lot of that money has gone into financial assets, but it's going into the real economy too. It's not just going to the stock market. Why do you think our trade deficits are exploding out of control? With fewer Americans on the job, where are Americans getting all this money to buy all this stuff? They're getting it from the Fed, right? They're getting it from the government, and the government's getting it from the Fed. So look, this is all inflation. All the people that want to pretend that QE isn't going to cause inflation, QE is inflation. That's what it is. Quantitative easing is a euphemism for inflation. Just every time anybody says quantitative easing, just substitute the word inflation. That's what they're talking about. Inflation is our monetary policy. Okay? And prices are going to go up as a consequence of inflation. Inflation is an expansion of the money supply. What is quantitative easing? An expansion of the money supply. How does the money supply expand? The Fed buys bonds or other assets, and it does it with the money that it creates out of thin air, right? And then it puts that money out there into circulation. And so everybody that wants to pretend that this is not going to result in a collapse of the value of money is deluding themselves. And as money loses value, you need more of it to buy stuff. And initially, you needed more money to buy stocks. You needed more money to buy real estate. You needed more money to buy bonds. You needed more money to buy art. Well, soon you're going to need more money to buy everything. And I think the dynamic of COVID, and especially, that's another thing where if Biden is more likely to completely shut back down the economy because of a second wave of COVID, that means we're producing even less stuff at the same time that we're printing even more money. So we got more money, we got less stuff. I mean, prices can only go one way, and that's up. But it shows you how difficult it is to try to do anything in banking. And that's all because of government regulation. I mean, again, I am opposed to all this regulation. I wish it would all go away. Now, because I oppose regulation doesn't mean I don't abide by it. I do abide by it. And because I abide by it and I see how expensive it is and how much inefficiency it causes, that's what makes me despise it all the more. It's my real world experience. I see firsthand all the damage that government regulation does. That's how I know we got to get rid of it. But just because I want to get rid of it doesn't mean that I ignore it. I don't ignore it. I follow all the regulations, right? I dot every worthless I and cross every ridiculous T. That is the problem. Mr. Awesome, what do you think about recent GDP numbers, 33% growth in Q3? Of course, we had big growth in Q3 because we collapsed in Q2. That's what happened. I mean, if you take the two quarters combined, I think the economy still contracted by about 8%. That's the story. Not the big rebound in Q3, but the fact that we collapsed in Q2. But the other part of the story is how much debt we took on in Q3. Yes, right? If you do enough drugs, you can have a pretty good party. But what about the hangover? Nobody wants to talk about what's going to happen as a result of all the debt that we took on in the third quarter. Record amounts of debt, massive borrowing, massive money printing. What was the big mover in Q3 GDP? It was consumer spending. That was off the charts, right? That was up like 40%. Now, you got all these consumers that have no jobs. Why are they spending more money? People should spend less money when they don't have a job. Is it a good thing when unemployed people spend more money? No, it's a bad thing. So we did something bad. Where did the unemployed get that money? From the government, right? You have a windfall. You have all these unemployed people making more money unemployed than they made when they were working. Now, is this good for the economy? Of course not. When they were working, the economy had the benefit of whatever it was they were producing with their labor. When they're not working, the economy gets no benefit because they're doing nothing. They're not contributing anything. But now they're just spending. So we're running up the debt. The trade deficits explode. The budget deficits explode. So none of this GDP that we saw in Q3 evidences how strong the economy is. It evidences how weak the economy is. It was weakness that led to that GDP number. But because it was weakness that created the high number in the current quarter, it's going to lead to much lower numbers in the future because that's all we did. We borrowed from our future to indulge our present, right? And that is not a recipe for economic success. It is a recipe for failure and disaster. And that is exactly the cake that we baked. What's the worst thing Trump has done? Well, I mean, there have been a lot of bad things that Trump has done, but I mean, if you want to just, kind of condense it down, it's making government bigger. If Donald Trump wanted to make America great again, there's only one way to do that, and that's make government smaller. And Donald Trump didn't do that. He made government bigger and more expensive. And also, we needed somebody to level with the American public. So another big problem that Trump had was his lack of honesty. He needed to level with the public about the severity of the problem and what is actually needed to solve it. Somebody had to do the tough love. Somebody had to have the guts to be the messenger of bad news. And Donald Trump didn't want any part of that. He was more concerned about being popular and getting reelected and all the good that did him because he probably won't get reelected, right? And so it was a complete waste, So it's like, again, it was very frustrating to me. And I said this at the time when I voted for him. I said, look, I don't know. I'm buying a pig in a poke. I mean, I'm taking the chance. Maybe Trump will do the right thing and maybe he'll do the wrong thing. What I said back then is that I knew that Hillary Clinton had no chance of doing the right thing. So she was 100% going to do the wrong thing. Trump, he didn't know. He might have done the right thing. Okay, he didn't, right? But, Hillary Clinton wouldn't have either. And there are a lot of people that think, again, Trump was saving all his good stuff for the second term. Maybe he was. Well, and we'll see. But if he doesn't get a second term, then we'll never know. But again, I don't believe that because if I was Trump, I would not want to risk all the good things on reelection because I wouldn't want to squander the opportunity I had gambling that I had another term. I would make the most of the term that I had. And where Donald Trump really showed his true colors was in the first term when the Republicans had the House and the Senate. He had 2 years to make a difference, and he didn't. He made government bigger. That's all he did. He increased government spending on welfare and on warfare, and he ran up the deficits. He didn't do anything that we needed a non-politician to do. And none of the stuff that he promised as a candidate did he deliver as president. It was just a show. And I enjoyed the fact that so many liberals just hated Trump. I mean, I like the fact that they were so upset.
same enemies that I would have if I was in public office. A lot of people who hate Trump would hate me. And you know what? You can tell just as much about somebody by the friends they keep as by the enemies that don't like them. Confucius said a long time ago, it's not good when everybody likes you. It's good when good people like you and bad people don't like you. That's good. And when the liberals don't like you, that's a good thing.
Because they, the stuff that they want to do is so bad. And, again, there are a lot of Trump people, Trump supporters that I like. I just wish they had a better champion in Trump. I just wish that somebody would be what Trump pretends to be. And I think Trump is a nicer guy. He's a personal guy. He's a much nicer guy than Biden. I think Biden's an ass and a criminal. He's he's been stealing. Biden and his family have been stealing, making a fortune. Imagine how much these crooks are going to make when they're president. The family's really going to clean up once their dad is
Ain't that the damn truth? See, sometimes I don't like his message or his delivery, but he's pretty straightforward. He sticks to less government, less taxation, less regulation, get government out of your lives. He's more about freedom. The freedom should be defined by the least amount of government. And I mean, anybody that has the more government in your life, the less freedoms you have. And that's why I just don't understand, especially liberals who claim about, freedom, we got to save the country for the future. You ain't saving nothing for the future. You're spinning us into oblivion. You're electing idiots that want to destroy this country to where there will be no future. And you're worried about freaking, endangered mosquito that's freaking, might go extinct in 50 million years. It's just freaking crazy.
Not trapped. And all of this money eventually flows into consumer goods. That's what it's all about. Nobody wants stocks for the sake of stocks, right? I mean, people want the things that they can buy with the money that they get when they sell their stocks or with the money they earn in dividends while they own their stocks, right? I mean, we can all be rich. If everybody decided not to sell their stocks, right? Like everybody agreed, nobody's going to sell anything. And then somebody wants to buy one share and it goes to $1 million, right? Now everybody has, millions and millions or billions of dollars in their brokerage account because we all agree not to sell our stock. And so one guy buys one share and the price goes through the roof because there's no sellers. And now as long as none of us tries to sell, we can all pretend that we're rich. Well, what good is pretending to be rich if you don't buy anything? What you want to do is you want to actually start to buy stuff with your riches. And that is going to happen. And then once you try to buy stuff, then the prices go through the roof. But for a while, people are just sitting on their stock portfolios, not saving, spending more money because they think they're getting rich on paper. But all of this is claims to wealth. Ultimately, the more claims there are on a stock of wealth, the higher the prices are going to go for the actual things that people really want to buy, the things that really make people's lives better, right? Because your stock portfolio doesn't do it. It's the things that you buy when you sell your stocks. And it's the things that you buy with your dividends. Of course, a lot of stocks don't even pay dividends. So the only way you can buy something with your stocks is if you sell them. So all of this inflation is ultimately going to come to rest in the consumer goods and services that we all desire. And that is everybody's goal, to consume more. But if we don't produce more, then we can't consume more. We just have to pay higher prices for the stuff we consume. And single multifamily go after the forthcoming crash. You stay flagflation. So will rents rise? Look, the rental market, it's going to be difficult for a lot of landlords because we know a lot of people aren't going to pay rent when they're unemployed. We know that the renters outnumber the landlords. And so the way politicians get votes is by pandering to the tenant, not the landlord. So I think it's going to be tough. I think there'll be a lot of landlords that are not going to get rent and they're not going to be able to evict their tenants. And I think, a lot of tenants are going to rent out rooms. People are going to take roommates and things like that. So I just think real estate in the United States is going to lose a lot of value. I mean, some real estate will lose more value than others, but I'm not a big fan now of investment property. Now, I think after real estate crashes in terms of gold, which it will, there may be some bargains, particularly if you can buy in markets that have more favorable rules for landlords, not for tenants. So you got to be very careful. I mean, places like California, probably very, very dangerous place to be a landlord. You might end up having to just ultimately walk away from your property. I mean, it may be too expensive to maintain it if your costs are going up, but you're not getting any rent. Yeah, I mean, I would much rather just, again, invest abroad right now. I just think there are a lot of problems coming for the U.S. economy, a lot of problems coming for stocks, real estate, the dollar. I'd rather let those problems shake out and then pick up the pieces. Just be in a position where I have the resources to buy when everybody else is selling. Would central banks have a vested interest in staying off the gold standard and instead using a basket of currencies? Yeah, look, central banks want nothing to do with the gold standard because the gold standard diminishes the power of government. So governments have never, wanted gold. I think eventually they're going to have no choice but to go back to it because I do think there will be a loss of confidence in paper money. And then the only way to restore that confidence will be to back it with something real. But they will resist doing that as long as they possibly can. But the public should want sound money. Sound money benefits individuals. It's good for the economy. It's good for economic freedom. There are all sorts of benefits that flow from sound money and gold. But for people who want something for nothing from government, gold stands in the way of that. But people who want freedom and people who want prosperity, then gold helps guarantee that. Gold is your friend. But it's the government's enemy to the extent that the government is trying to manipulate the markets and create the appearance of a free lunch. You can't really do that with gold. You can fool people with a fiat system until the system eventually implodes. If the U.S. went to a gold standard, given our trade deficit, wouldn't we run out of gold ASAP if our creditors exchanged their dollars for physical gold? Look, if we went back on a gold standard, our trade deficit would go away. That's the reality. Because otherwise, we'd run out of gold. We'd have to start buying all our stuff with gold. That would bring back fiscal discipline. And of course, the price of gold would have to go up, number one, unless the price of everything else came crashing down. So in order to get back on a gold standard, gold price needs to go up. It needs to be revalued. But if the world was back on a gold standard, then yes, the only way you can run trade deficits would be if you lost your gold. But the markets would correct that. You couldn't happen. So we'd have to import less. We'd have to start producing more. Now, in order to do that, we'd have to start shrinking government, right? So all these good things would happen if we went back on a gold standard. We would have to finally fix all the problems, deal with the problems of the past by solving them and providing for a better future. And a lot of it will start with the discipline that will be imposed on our leaders by the gold standard. That's why they oppose it. They don't want that discipline. They don't want to be reined in. But at least the gold standard gives you an excuse. Hey, I've got to do it, right? I don't want to, but this is what we have to do. This is the economic reality. The dollar to silver ratio is 4,268 per ounce, and dollar to gold is 35,000. Is it reasonable to think that we go back to gold? We can see those prices. Well, that $4,000 silver, that seems really up there. $32,000 gold. Those are some high prices. Look, is that impossible? Obviously, it's not impossible. Of course, if we have hyperinflation, the prices are meaningless, right? But I don't know that we're going to get up that high. But I think that we can certainly get $10,000, $20,000 gold, and we can certainly see several $100s an ounce for silver. I don't know about 4,000. You really have to get some massive inflation to get the price of silver up that high. Seems like Trump is taking. What is a libertarian answer to the problem of climate change? Well, first of all, you have to assume that there is climate change, and more importantly, that it's man-made and there's something that we can do about it. And so I think even if you accept the fact that the climate is changing, I think it's a stretch to believe that it's changing in any significant degree based on humanity and what we're doing, and that there is something that we could do about it. And that even if we try, that we could succeed, and that the cost of succeeding may be worse than just allowing the change to take place. But the libertarians do have an answer to pollution and things like that. They do hold the polluter responsible. They do, it's just like any other act of aggression. Just like somebody can't steal from me or assault me, they can't pollute my air, they can't pollute my water, and people can be held accountable financially for the damages that their conduct imposes on other people. So there's nothing inconsistent between a limited government and clean air and clean water and things like that. The big government people like to pretend that without big government nobody could breathe. We'd all have polluted air and polluted water. And that's not the case. So we can have even cleaner air and cleaner water in a true free market environment than in the environment we have now. Is there an alternative to the Green New Deal? First, the Green New Deal is a bunch of nonsense. That's a disaster. The Green New Deal is far worse than climate change could ever be. So there is no libertarian alternative to that, because that's just a complete disaster. It's just an excuse to impose socialism, and that's the environmentalists, or environmentalism has been used by socialists for a long time. They use the environmental causes to advance the socialist agenda, and basically the Green New Deal just puts that on steroids. Is there a libertarian argument for banning fracking if it can be demonstrated that it is harmful? Look, there's no argument for the federal government to ban anything, but certainly on a local level, to the extent that there's some proof of damage, the person responsible for that damage can be held financially accountable to the people he's damaged. Sure, and there can be local regulations if that's if government wants to do that. Look, I'm not an anarchist. I'm not advocating for no government at all. I certainly want a very, very limited role for the federal government. And to the extent that there is environmental regulation, it should be imposed by those governments that are closest to the source of the pollution. So
you've heard me say before, I think the federal government is the biggest threat to this country ever. They're expanding power, they're expanding land grab, they're expanding regulation, they're expanding passing laws. The federal government is basically just taken over any branch they want. There's no check on power for the federal government. They make these crazy laws. They let organizations make stupid gun laws. They let them redefine what a gun is, what a stock is, what a submachine gun is, what a bullet is, what this bullet. They just get to redefine it. Nothing goes through our House of Representatives for them to make it a law. It's just the federal government gets to go around it and subvert all that. So there's no checks and balances on the federal government. I've always been anti-federal government 100%. Lock their ass up in Washington and kick them the hell out of every state. Now, he's in Puerto Rico, and he says they don't pay any federal tax there because they don't have federal government paying and doing all that bullshit. But he says their local tax is high. I'm all for no federal tax. Shit, I think Texas ought to freaking not be a state and get the hell out of the freaking federal government and kick every damn federal agency and federal regulation out of this state and say, you know what? We don't really give a shit what you think. But I don't know if that would make me an anarchist or whatever. This was an interesting take on Bitcoin, because I know there's a lot of people that keep telling me buy Bitcoin, it's going to go through the roof, it's the new currency, this and that. So all the Bitcoin lovers kind of hate me because I haven't jumped on that bandwagon. he kind of slams because he thinks the dollar is going to crash. He is anti-dollar because he knows they're just printing money. It's worth nothing. And as soon as everybody catches on, anybody in dollars is going to be screwed. And the mass of this country doesn't realize it, isn't keeping up, and they're going to be looking for the government to help them. And then they'll be wondering why we're like Zimbabwe, where it costs $600 million to buy one egg. And then they'll figure out, damn, this currency thing doesn't really work out. I thought I had a lot of money. But so here he really slams Bitcoin because the guy asked him if you had to choose between Bitcoin and the dollar, Peter chooses the dollar. I would never think he would choose the dollar, but he does.
Here's a guy who says, let's find yourself in a pickle. You only have two places you can keep your wealth, US dollars or Bitcoin. Well, if it was, look, I would take dollars over Bitcoin if that was it. I mean, if I had to put all...
That is freaking amazing because I expected him to go, well, you know what? The dollar's so bad and it's so horrible. I would go, Bitcoin, I'm telling you, man, I just can't believe the amount of people that have not got out of it. And I feel sorry for him when it crashes. And you know what? Maybe I'll be a dummy. And in 5 years, all Bitcoin people will be running the earth because they'll all be rich. And it'll be more than gold. And it'll be more than silver. And it'll be more to any dollars. And everyone will love Bitcoin. I could be wrong, but I'm going to take a swag and say it ain't happening.
All my money in dollars, right? I put all my money in Bitcoin. As much as I dislike the dollar, I think that's what I would have to do. But I'm never going to have to make that choice. So it's kind of like irrelevant because I don't like either. I don't think the dollar is going to survive in its present form, and neither will Bitcoin. The one thing about the dollar is, it is more convenient for me to use dollars. So I actually need some dollars. I mean, I transact in them. I pay taxes in dollars. So I don't need Bitcoin for anything. I mean, I could speculate in it if I wanted to, but I don't actually need it. Whereas question, I just have to ask, is there a market cap that Bitcoin can reach that says, okay, fine, I believe it will work? Look, so the question is, at some point, will the price of Bitcoin go so high that I just think it's going to work? And look, it's already gotten to 20,000, and I still don't think it's going to work. It's 14,000 almost right now. So that's already a pretty high price, given that it started from pennies. So, it's not a function of price that does it for me. I would actually have to see Bitcoin function and work as money, as a medium of exchange, as a unit account, as a store of value. I just don't think it's possible that Bitcoin can serve in that medium. I don't think it can do that. It hasn't done that.
Not only can it not do it, the government wouldn't allow it. Government hate competition. That's why they don't want to go on a gold standard. How can you people think the government is going to allow Bitcoin to replace the dollar and money and not start regulating it and causing price increases and manipulating it and making it harder and start tracking it? The government's not going to allow that.
Now, the other people say, well, it doesn't actually have to do that. It doesn't actually have to be used as a currency, as money. It could just be a reserve asset. It could just be held like gold. But I don't think that can happen either. I mean, can it happen in a short period of time? Sure, anything can be possible in the short run. But can it persist in that function over the long term? I don't think so. But how many years? I mean, if in 20 or 30 years, I mean, Bitcoin has served that function and it has ridden out various economic cycles. And even though it hasn't been money, I mean, if it is held as a reserve asset by pension funds, by endowments, I mean, if it is more widespread and mainstream, I mean, if central banks actually have Bitcoin reserves that they're now reporting as part of their official reserves, and it's possible that I would have to concede that Bitcoin was able to succeed in accomplishing that. But right now, it hasn't. And so I think the onus is on the people who have been saying that's going to happen. It hasn't. Why hasn't it happened? Right? If you're so sure that that's going to happen, I mean, you're asking me to concede something that hasn't happened. To me, the onus is on Bitcoin to prove that it can do that, not me to prove that it can't. Those two. And he says, me as Fed chairman. I guess if I was Fed chairman, I mean, it would be good. Hopefully it would be a short-lived chairmanship because I'd like to end the Fed. And so I would end my role. But there'd be very little for me to do. If we can go back on a gold standard, then there's really not much for a Fed chairman to do. I mean, right now, the role of the Fed is to manipulate money and to facilitate deficit spending and inflate asset bubbles. I don't want to do any of that.
I want to make sure some people who don't understand the Fed is not the federal government. The Fed is private bankers that manipulate the cash. So, and the president, which I don't understand this for the life of me, appoints the Fed chairman. It's not even a government entity. And yet the president appoints the Fed chairman. I ought to ask Peter that or have him explain that. But anyway.
Somerville, can you help us understand what more stimulus will do to the U.S. dollar and the economy? And what would you expect the Fed to do over the next 4 years? Look, I expect the Fed to keep doing what it's been doing, only more of it. And the reason they're going to do more of it is because it doesn't work. And it's just like any drug addiction. The more drugs you take, the more drugs you need to take in the future. You build up a tolerance. And so if you want to get high, you need even more of it. And that's what they're going to do. And the Fed is going to keep on prescribing larger doses of the same toxic medicine until the patient overdoses and dies. And that's the collapse of the dollar. And that's where we're headed. Now, the question is, what happens after that? What happens when the dollar collapses? And again, a lot of that may depend on who's in office at the time and what policies they pursue. At that time, I don't know. I'm going to hope for the best, but I'm going to plan for the worst. But I think regardless of whether we get the best or the worst, I think the dollar has to lose a lot of value. Even under the best case scenario, it's going to lose a lot of value. Even under the best case scenario, gold's going to go up. And I think my foreign investments are going to outperform domestic investments, even if we get the best case scenario. Of course, if we get the worst case scenario, then the returns will be even better, certainly in relative to what people would have in the U.S. But I think regardless of what happens, I think I've done the right thing. And so I'm going to continue to maintain these positions.
Okay, so hell, I've covered almost 2 hours. If you want to go watch this, you can play it in the background. He to me, he makes a lot of sense. A lot of people have told me over the years that I'm more of a libertarian than I am a conservative. I think I hold conservative values a little bit more than libertarian. My anti-government is definitely libertarian. But anyway, just something to think about. If you liked it, cool. Make sure and like Peter Schiff, and you can watch him. Hopefully, you better watch this early, because if the YouTube or him or one of his cronies try to copyright me on this, I'm just going to remove it. So I mean, whatever. And if he calls me to do that, then I'll probably stop watching his ass, because I'm trying to get the word out, and this should be helping him. But with copyright shit nowadays, they got to harass everybody. It's like freaking government in your ass. But anyway, all right, we'll end that there. Y'all have a good one.